we are all so different, and we do all have to find our own way through grief. But I think there are better ways and not such helpful ways of grieving. So I think the things I'd say are it won't always feel this bad. As Jane said, that it never goes away. The hole is still there, but it is a lot less jagged around the edges. I think another thing I'd say is it's okay to feel difficult things. Grieving is not just about sadness. It's about uncomfortable feelings like anger and guilt and bitterness and envy. And I think we have to remember that it's okay to feel those things. And we also, it's really important that we try to let ourselves feel everything we're feeling, that we try not to sort of keep a lid on it. Because as Jane says, it will out in the end. And I will try to create times when I can actually connect with my grief and with Sam. And I was quite active in that. I would go and look at photos and play recordings of his voice, and I would really allow it to come. And I think, don't be scared of grief. It will feel overwhelming at times, but actually what it costs us to keep it in is far worse than what it costs us to let it out. Do ask for help, because sometimes we need help with this, and particularly if you're feeling stuck, I would say to anyone, get help. There's plenty out there. The project Jane runs, the Good Grief Project, looks absolutely fantastic, everything they do. And so I would say, do ask for help, and most of all, on a practical level, keep on doing the things that help you. For me, that was connecting with nature. It was walking. It was walking the dog. It was having those routines. Really, really important. And I think most of all, keep alive the person who's died. If we don't actively keep them alive, if we don't allow ourselves to feel all the pain, then I've known people who somehow, in locking away the pain, also lock away all the good stuff. And that's really a tragedy, because what we have to learn to do is to accommodate the person who's died, in a new way. We have to sort of develop a new relationship with them, so that we'll never move on. I mean, I hate it when people talk about moving on, because I don't think you do move on. I think what you can do is move forward, and take that person with you.
For me, what really helps is the discovery that grief is about openings, not closure. And for me, closure is the dirty C word. It really is. And that for me, discovering that grief isn't linear, that it isn't about the stages of grief, because the stages are really useful, but they all happen out of sync and in different order, and they happen when you least, it creeps up on you when you least expect it. So it's about being prepared for the unexpected. It's about shedding the burden of trying to present yourself in a way that's okay for other people. You have to actually make friends with your grief, and you have to allow other people, in a way, the right people, to see what that means. But I think it's important to choose who you share your grief with, because some people really, with the best will in the world, could be the kindest hearted in the world, aren't up for it or up to it, and they know that, but they don't know how to say it. So sometimes you have to help people to say, I don't know if I can help you. So choose who you talk to. Find peer support groups. The Compassionate Friends, for example, is a wonderful group. Find peer support so that people are speaking to you from the inside looking out. They get it from first-hand experience. I think continuing bonds is hugely important. As I said before, it's learning to live with this new normal that is I suppose it's about that hole in your heart, but actually with time, you become clearer and clearer that that isn't a hole anymore, that Josh is with me wherever I go. I take him with me comfortably almost, and I share my thinking with him, and I wonder about what it would be like, what Josh would be doing. But I also rejoice in the fact that through his death, amazing things have happened as well. And one of the things that I couldn't ever have imagined is that his brother fell in love with Josh's best friend, and they now have 2 babies together who are my grandchildren. And I'm so lucky to have other children because lots of bereaved parents don't. I'm also really lucky to have grandchildren because a lot of bereaved parents will never have grandchildren. But the thing is that out of the love shared for Josh, this amazing thing happened. And I would do anything to bring him back. But isn't that incredible that, you know, that connection, that continuing bond, that sort of love of Josh has connected so many people. And through our films, we've been able to share that with other people too. And I suppose you have to be open to whatever is going to happen next, because I would never have imagined my life would have taken the course it's taken. And I would have done everything to change it initially. But I think that with acceptance and forgiveness, and I mean self-forgiveness too, because I think every bereaved parent, as Jill knows, blames themselves to a certain degree, however illogical it is. We should never blame ourselves, but we do. And I think that we have to be kind to ourselves. And I would say to every bereaved parent, every bereaved person out there, be kind to yourself, because at the end of the day, if you don't forgive yourself, you're really going to struggle. And you need to be kind to yourself. I've had to be kind to myself, and I think Jill's clearly been kind to herself, and I think Mark, you've been kind to yourself too, because we've all lived a nightmare of the worst things that can happen, and yet we've all come through it. I think I can say stronger. I see Mark's strength, I see Jill's strength, I feel my strength, and it might sound strange to say, but I'm so happy to have learned this about myself and been able to meet the amazing, charismatic, powerful, wonderful, brave people that I've met through my learning, through what Josh has taught me in his short life, 22 years. I wish it could have been longer, but 22 years is quite a long time.
Ripley was our only child, and at the point at which she was diagnosed with cancer, was a couple of weeks before her 2nd birthday. She was the only grandchild in our family as well, and she was, to be honest, one of the only children amongst our group of friends. So whilst everyone was really supportive, we had loads of support through the 9 months that we went through treatment with her in the hospital, and for a few weeks after we came back, we had time at the hospice with her. So we had a week with her after she died, leading up to the funeral, and then we had kind of people around for the week after the funeral, and then after that it was kind of, right, you're on your own, carry on. But yeah, I think it very much echoes that what Jane was saying, is that you kind of represent everyone else's worst nightmare. So even if they want to help, you're kind of a constant reminder for them that actually horrible things happen in the world. And even if you're there and they want to help, that fear for them is much easier if you can avoid that, if you don't have to address that. So being that reminder for people is quite tricky. And you can see that on people's faces when you talk to them. So I've had quite a lot of people asking me how many at work, well, you don't have children because you're commuting to work, or making assumptions around things. And I'm now able to say, actually, I do have a child and she's died. But when very early on in my grief, I wasn't able to do that. And that felt really hard, because you're the person that's then kind of showing and highlighting people that actually children do die in this world. And you have to deal with their reaction on top of trying to deal with your grief and being able to explain to somebody that your child died. Like, I don't need to deal with your reactions as well. I need you to comfort me, not me to comfort you. And I think quite often I find that I'm the one that's then kind of comforting the person after I've told them that my child's died, rather than what you would hope and expect of that being the other way around.
I think it's a very lonely place, to be honest. To everybody asking how the wife is, how is everybody. No one really ever asks, but how are you? And that is something that, it's hard to describe the feeling there. It's lonely, I guess, is the word for it. But to be able to now talk openly, and people do realise, we use a hashtag on Twitter sometimes, if I'm still a dad, and people, the mother is obviously carried the baby. The mother has done everything she can, but from the moment we found out we were pregnant, that was fatherhood for me, and that will always be fatherhood. And no one can take that away. I was preparing myself for the life that we envision, and to no longer have that, at that time, to not be able to bring that baby home and, father the child as you wanted to, there's a piece missing from you. But now I think it may be because I'm so vocal about it, people do recognize it, and people are talking, and therefore hopefully in their life, to speak to other people, if they come across it, that it has that knock-on effect, and it snowballs, that it's still the dad's baby as well. It's not just the mum's baby.
We did have one parent tell us that she had been told by one of her friends that her child was now an angel. And she told us that the next person who said that was going to find themselves becoming an angel as well, which I thought was an absolutely wonderful way of expressing that. But that was certainly something that was reflected in a lot of the sort of interviews that we held, where parents were just saying, look, I don't want anyone to fix it because it can't be fixed. And actually, depending on where they kind of were in the process of grief, some of them were expressing views of sort of, actually, even if it could be fixed, I wouldn't want it to be, because I actually need to feel this pain, and I actually need to go through this as part of my love for my child. But that all I really want is for somebody to sit with me and say, this is awful. This is the worst thing that will ever happen to you. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. I'll just be here. And that, as you were saying, Jane, I think that is very, very difficult for people to do, because it taps into their own fears of, awful things happening for no reason, or for their own fears of mortality, or their own fears for their own children. But that is ultimately the best thing that can be done, according to the parents that we spoke to.
I never really never ever thought about my grief. Never. As a bloke towards you missus, because I'm quite an old school fella, all I ever wanted to be was a support for her. And watching her go through her grief was awful. It was just awful. It's like someone was beating her up and there was nothing I could do about it. So all I wanted to do was be a support for her and be strong for her. My grief came later, which is why I ended up writing a film all those years later, except I never really stopped to think about me. And to be honest as well, something that came out is that nobody even stopped to ask about how I felt during that journey, because I was a bloke. No one really thinks about that. I'm generalising, I know. And when I look back at it, a bit like Kemi said, when I look back at it now, it's like it's such a distant past because of what's happened. And part of that journey did help towards us kind of splitting up, which causes more grief. But I think what you have to do, or what I try to do, is just put closure on it and try and move on from it. And that's all you can do. And it sits with you, you're reminded of it. But looking back on it, I didn't realise just how much grief I was going through until after the fact. And by then it was all a little bit too late. But I think positive and got other stories to tell. That's how I try and move on.
So my background, my parents are Nigerian, and you grow up, you go to school, you get a degree, you get married, you have children, that's it. That's how the steps go. And so that was what defined me as a female. And then obviously you see on TV, what defines people as females, like women are very sexualized anyway. So you kind of attach being a woman to being a childbearing woman as well. So when that didn't happen, I mean, at my wedding, people would say, okay, we're going to come and see you again in 9 months. We're going to celebrate with you in 9 months. So already, I haven't even like been married 24 hours and people talking about a baby in the next 9 months. You know, so there's that pressure that's there. And that kind of stays with you. And when you feel that, oh gosh, if I see someone who was at my wedding 2 years ago, the first thing they're going to say is, oh, have you guys got any children yet? And that was a constant thing. If I bumped into people, you got any children yet? You got any children yet? Not how you doing or how's your husband is. Oh, have you got any children? And you kind of think that that is what defines you, and that's what means that, you know, equates to you being a woman. So I went through the feelings of just, well, obviously I'm not a woman because I can't get pregnant. I'm not having periods every month. So that's the first strike one. And then I did get pregnant, and then I couldn't even hold the pregnancy. So I just went through so much emotions of just feeling like, what's the point in being here? You know, I went through the point where I said, you know, God, just take me away so that my husband can marry someone and she can give him kids. That's just how I felt. I didn't want to get up. I didn't want to leave the house. I just felt so inadequate. Like, okay, well, my body's failing me. It's not doing. I've got all these female organs and they're not working. And I couldn't process it. I couldn't take myself out of the equation. And it was a blame game. I think, as Rod said earlier, that you just blame yourself. You think that you're the one who's wholly responsible for it. And it had such an effect on like my husband, because all he was trying to do was be there for me. And there were just days where I just didn't want to be here. And I guess it was only when I was diagnosed with breast cancer that I truly realized how much I wanted to live. And I think I would have felt that same way had Samuel not been here or not. I would have just thought, do you know what, I've got, as Rod said, I've got so much more to talk about. Me having a baby or not having a baby it doesn't define who I am. And there's so much more to talk about. So, but one of the things I am grateful for is that our clinic that we were with, they offered us counselling. On our first and second round, we said no. And on the third one, we thought, okay, let's do this. It was hands down one of the best decisions that we made, just to speak to someone. It was over Skype, but she was absolutely amazing. And she played such a pivotal role in me taking myself out of the equation and not blaming myself for what was going on. And lo and behold, on our fourth round, you know, it worked, you know. So there is a lot of help that needs to be implemented with people who are trying. I don't think it's so much as enough just to say, well, these are the treatments that are available. It's about counselling and talking to people as well. So that's really, really key.
I still take one day at a time. I see what today brings. I try not to look too far in the future, because grief, you can be bouncing along like a little happy kangaroo, and then it's like bang.
Yeah.
And that's why I try not to think too far, because I don't want to think, right, okay, this is how it's going to be now. It was the anniversary of losing Josh 2 weeks ago, and absolutely the week before you start feeling yourself, and you cannot control it. So when I'm in my darkest moments, it then goes to an hour at a time. I have to get through this hour, and I use the skills that I did right at the beginning. I needed to find something that I enjoyed, and I'm not talking about going out and, you know, painting or writing, which I know Rachel does. What for me, it was literally having a cup of coffee and sitting there and feeling that moment. And is this moment okay? So that's a 3-minute moment that's okay. It's still in me. I'm still able to find that moment. So I've just got to get through this hour, then another one, then another one, until you're back in that stronger moment, until the next adventure that wipes you out. But for me, it's just I've got to keep going day by day.
People that are going through and have gone through similar experiences to you. It won't be the same because nobody's grief is identical, but there are other people that can understand, and that there is hope, and that hope varies at different points. And sometimes you will be able to feel that hope all the time, and even at points years later, you will still have dark bits where the hope disappears, but that it always comes back. And to use whatever is meaningful to you, like Sarah was saying, to find that connection, so that you can continue that. And as I said, I think earlier on, that the most helpful thing that someone said to me was that my grief is the expression of love for my daughter. And that really helped. If you are grieving, it's because you loved them and they know that you loved them, and that love doesn't go away just because they've died.